I uncovered 3 terrifying true stories from the countryside that will haunt your dreams. I never should have opened that door. Darkness engulfed me. A chilly breeze swept through, whispering secrets I wasn't ready to hear. It was a night just like any other. I was settling down after a long day, the usual creaks of the old house fading into the background. I thought I was safe. I thought I knew this place, but then, I heard it. A soft rustle at the window. I glanced over. Just shadows. Or at least, I tried to convince myself. The air felt different, thick, electric. My heart raced. Each beat echoed in my chest, warning me, urging me to turn back. I shook it off, laughed nervously under my breath. That's when I remembered the stories. The first was about a farmer who vanished without a trace. They said he heard laughter at midnight, followed by heavy footsteps in the field. Deep footprints leading to a place no one dared to go. He was never seen again, only whispers of his name floating in the breeze. I shivered at the thought, a chill crawling up my spine. The second tale danced around the village like smoke. They said a woman could be seen wandering the old woods, her dress trailing behind her like a creeping shadow. If you caught her eye, you were doomed to join her in eternal wandering. Many had claimed to see her, a flash of white in the corner of their eye, a soft sobbing that echoed through the trees. I gulped, the lump in my throat tightening, picturing her ghostly figure dissolving among the branches. Then, of course, there was the story of the church at the end of the lane. People disappeared there too. Every storm, as if nature itself conspired against those who dared to enter. The storm would roll in, dark and menacing, and with it, the screams would start. They echoed through the village, chilling the bone. Once the storm passed, so did the people. No amount of searching could bring them back. I felt a shift in the air, a sound, no, a whisper. It brushed past my ear, sending ripples of fear through me. Someone or something was in the house. My gut twisted, panic surged. I turned towards the sound, breath caught in my throat. I backed away slowly, heart hammering. The darkness seemed to pulse with life, shadows stretching and yawning. The door behind me creaked open just a crack. I could see a figure, barely illuminated, waiting. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The figure at the door shifted, rippling like smoke against the backdrop of darkness. Heart racing, I pressed myself against the cold wall, trying to breathe without making a sound, praying the shadows would swallow me whole. My eyes strained to make out who or what was waiting for me. Help me, the whisper traveled like a wraith, curling around my mind, knotting my stomach tighter. It was feminine, ethereal, yet twisted with an underlying desperation that sent shards of ice through my veins. Please, I flicked my gaze toward the window, but it was still just shadows dancing in the pale moonlight. A futile gesture, I couldn't escape through that avenue. An invisible force pinned me down, and even the very act of moving felt sacred, a betrayal to the chilling entity beckoning me closer. The soft sobbing returned, rising like a tide in the silence surrounding me. Memories of the woman in white flooded my thoughts. Had she tied this ominous presence to herself? Was the laughter of the vanished farmer her echoing madness? It was as if the stories I had dismissed were now colliding, weaving a tapestry of dread that threatened to consume me. Help me, find them, the voice pleaded, thick with emotion, but I stood paralyzed. Each word tugged at some buried whim of compassion, conflicting with the instinct to bolt and never look back. A single beat of courage pulsed through me, and I turned myself toward the door, feeling the fabric of the night stretch, a taut string ready to snap. Who are you? I breathed, my voice trembling, betraying my fear, the figure drifted closer, a distortion in the fabric of reality. Its face remained obscured, what little light trickled in illuminated only the tangled mess of dark hair cascading around its shoulders. "Please," it implored again, sorrow laced with urgency. "Help me." Just then, a deafening crack of thunder reverberated through the house. The lights flickered, threatening to plunge me into absolute darkness. I stumbled backward as the walls quivered, the floorboards groaning beneath the weight of a storm that had no presence outside. It felt as if the house itself was alive, writhing in response to the unseen horrors just out of reach. Suddenly, the figure's silhouette sharpened, a flash of white catching my eye, a ghostly dress dragging like a wretched shroud. The screams of the disappeared echoed in that instant, their sound swelling until it enveloped me, walls closing in with the rising terror. I could sense the weight of their souls, desperate and restless, pressing into the room where they had once lived. "Help me find the others." The figure's voice morphed into a high-pitched wail, shattering the air around me, becoming one with the howling wind. I saw her now, the glint of anguish carved into her features, her eyes two hollow voids training on me as every lantern flickered and died, leaving me hair's breadth away from a complete nightmare. That I didn't notice another shadow slip into view, emerging from behind the figure. Something darker and more combative loomed, pressing forward with a pull so tangible I could feel it in my bones, pulling me toward the depths of its realm. "They need to be set free," it hissed, the voice a snake slithering through the space between us. Bolts of electricity crackled above me before the room exploded into chaotic noise, distant screams, unsettling laughter, shattering glass. My heart raced as the ground beneath me trembled, a deep rumble resonating through the house. "Join us!" the figure screamed, reaching towards me, ethereal fingers clawing the air. Reality fractured around me, and I teetered on the edge, both terrified and entranced by the disturbing beauty of their plight. Several more shadows rising in my periphery, their forms twisted in agony and longing, yearning to be freed. As the spectral hands beckoned, the room blurred, the walls pulsating like a heart flipping into a frenzied rhythm, and then, all at once, the lights extinguished, plunging me into darkness as cold fingers brushed against my skin, the shadows merging with my own being. The last thing I heard was a breath, hot against my ear, as I felt myself being pulled deeper into the void, an invitation irrevocably binding me to the tragedy that plagued the land. Then, silence fell. In the suffocating void, I felt myself fall, spiraling through an abyss of despair. Time lost all meaning, it was as though reality itself had unraveled, and I was a mere thread caught in the fraying fabric of existence. Shadows gathered at the edges of my senses, swirling like a tempest, their whispers growing louder, spilling secrets I was ready to confront. Suddenly, the sensation of being pulled abruptly ceased. I landed hard on a cold, unforgiving surface, the breath knocked from my lungs. Panic engulfed me as I struggled to sit upright, the crushing weight of dread threatening to smother me. My pulse thundered in my ears, the rhythm echoing my mounting fear. That I opened my eyes to a dimly lit cellar, walls encased in damp stone that seemed to close in around me. A faint, flickering light emanated from a cluster of candles lining a rusty metal table, their flames casting jittery shadows that danced grotesquely. I gasped, instinctively bringing my hands to my throat as if to quell an unseen grip. The familiar mixture of anguish and longing permeated the air. "Welcome!" a voice, slithering and distorted, filled the space. I swung around, my breathing quickening as I strained to spot the source. The flickering light illuminated grotesque images inked on the walls, figures in torment, their faces twisted in unimaginable agony. They seemed to watch me, begging for release. My heart plummeted. These were not merely illustrations, they were memories imprinted in the stone, snapshots of damned souls that had ventured to this forsaken place before me. "I'm here to help you," I stammered, though it felt like a lie even as I spoke the words. I could sense the intensity of their collective gaze upon me. Every shade, every hue whispered a shared history of suffering, deaths unacknowledged, lives interrupted. I was drawn to the faces, shapes shifting like smoke, yet their haunting expressions held a remarkable human pain that made me shiver. "Help!" they echoed, their voices intertwining until it was an unsettling chorus. "There is no help without sacrifice." The words hung heavy in the air, saturating the darkness with a gnawing tension. Suddenly, a flash of memory slammed into me, images of the woman in white, her sorrow palpable, intertwined with the laughter of the farmer who vanished into thin air. What had I stumbled upon? A web of misfortune spun from desperation, hatred, and grief, perhaps. The scales of fate hung precariously, and I felt like a lost child in this haunted labyrinth. As I grappled with the heavy mantle of realization, the atmosphere shifted. A grating sound split the air like nails on chalkboard. From beneath the table, a wooden box emerged, its lid shifting as if driven by an unseen force. My instincts screamed at me to run, but curiosity shackled me in place. Whatever lay inside beckoned with an insidious allure that I took a cautious step forward, but as I did, the tormented faces etched into the walls began to contort, their expressions morphing into terror. No! They cried in unison, their voices rising into a furious crescendo, a cacophony of agony that shook the ground beneath my feet. The box burst open with a violent clang, spewing an inky black mist that groaned like the souls it carried. Tendrils of darkness snaked through the air toward me, grasping, clawing, each cool touch igniting a jolt of pure fear. I stumbled back, colliding against the stone wall, panic slicing through me as my memories twisted, revealing flashes of darkness from my own past I had kept hidden. I want to leave. I pleaded, my voice cracking, but the shadows howled in protest, a symphony of lost hopes reverberating through the loft. Their despair seeped into me, flooding my thoughts, filling my chest with a suffocating dread that matched the darkness closing in. I fought against the void, my mind racing as desire turned to fear. But then, something caught my eye, the fleeting visage of the figure from before, the woman in white. Her eyes were wide and pleading, and for the briefest moment, I thought I could see them, the others lost among the shadows, their forms twisted into desperation, a reflection of everything I feared to face. Join us, the darker echo of the figure hissed, the shadows swelling as if preparing to consume everything I held dear. Or suffer their fate. I looked back at the box, the tendrils writhing, only a heartbeat away from connecting, and then everything hit a breaking point. The scream that erupted from my lips felt like the very essence of my soul tearing free, filled with all the anguish of lost lives trapped within this nightmarish realm. In the chaos of faces and shadows merging, the shadow of the woman threw her hand toward me, screaming a warning. But it was too late. Just as I truly realized the depth of her sorrow, I was seized by a force so powerful it eclipsed my entire existence. The cellar was swallowed by a consuming darkness, and just before everything faded to black, I heard her chilling whisper echo through the void, "Find them," and with that, there was silence, followed by an unsettling feeling of eyes watching, waiting for my next step, my next misstep. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with an insidious anticipation that coiled tightly around my throat. I blinked, trying to regain my bearings, but the darkness swirling around me felt alive, sentient, an ominous entity that embraced me like a shroud. I was afloat in a timeless void replete with dread, isolated and vulnerable, but then, a low whisper sliced through the heavy air, a soft, knowing taunt that resonated in the depths of my mind. "You're deeper now, deeper than before." The voice coiled around my consciousness, tightening until the weight of it threatened to drown me. I shuddered, desperate to locate my position within this malevolent realm. As clarity seeped back in, I realized I was no longer in the cellar. I stood in an obscured landscape, enveloped by mist that clung to the earth like a whisper of loss. In the distance, fragmented shapes emerged, a farm, twisted and broken, the remnants of lives once cherished now reduced to skeletal remains. Cries emerged on the wind, jarring yet indistinct. I was compelled toward the dilapidated farmhouse at the center of the desolation. Each cautious step stirred the still air, and with every footfall, I felt a pulse, an aching yearning for liberation that hung thick in the atmosphere. As I approached the door, rusted and splintered, it swung open with a mournful creak, revealing an interior steeped in shadow. The same flickering candlelight I had seen moments ago danced against the sagging walls, illuminating aged photographs that hung askew. Faces stared back at me with hollow eyes, etched in despair and misunderstanding, a family torn apart. "Find them," the whispers encircled me again, insistent, as if the very essence of their suffering clung to every molecule of the air. They were tethered to this place, begging for someone to finally understand their pain. "Where are you?" I called out, my voice shivering through the stillness. Cautiously, I stepped into the room, drawn inexorably to a staircase ascending into darkness above. The air grew frigid, and a gut-wrenching sense of foreboding surged, but I gripped the banister and inhaled deeply, steeling myself for whatever unspeakable horror awaited me. The staircase creaked ominously beneath my feet, echoing like distant screams. Glowing orbs flickered at the top, illuminating a vast space beyond a hall that felt like the mouth of a gaping maw. As I reached the landing, my skin prickled, a wave of primordial terror washed over me like a cold tide. A noise, low and guttural, reverberated from within the room ahead. I hesitated, then moved closer, peering into the dim light. There, in the deepened shadows, stood a figure vague and indistinct yet powerfully commanding attention, like a twisted silhouette torn from a nightmare. "Help us," it croaked, the words raw and broken. It was a voice burdened with layers of grief, echoing the pain of thousands crammed into a single sound. My heart raced as I spotted unmistakable features of face framed by a cascade of dark hair. It struck me with a chilling familiarity, her eyes glinting like shards of glass, each reflecting the fractured stories of those lost. What are you?" I stammered, the words barely breaking free. But she didn't answer. Instead, she raised a finger, pointing into the shadows behind her. A shiver ran down my spine as I felt unseen eyes converge, a thrumming whisper of many, fiercely intertwining. Suddenly, they began to manifest, figures rising from the corners of the room, stepping forth from dark recesses, each one twisted, gaunt, forlorn. Former farmers, lost wives, children who had laughed but now wore faces splashed with terror. "Join us!" they cried in unison, the sound raising the hairs on my arms and tightening the knot in my stomach. "You cannot escape our fate." With that, the room erupted into chaos, the shadows surging forward, reaching for me with desperate hands that clawed and grasped, their coldness biting into my skin. I spun around, frantic, and the figure of the woman in white stood resolute in the center, staring, unyielding, her expression a mix of anguish and determination. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice breaking in my throat. But the shadows roared, a cacophony of laughter and weeping, igniting a primal fear that rooted me in place. Realization struck like a lightning bolt. This was not merely a rescue mission for lost souls, it was an engulfing cycle, a trap designed to ensnare me within their horror, to forge my spirit in the fires of their tragedy. And then, just as I felt the claws of despair wrap around my ankles, the floor beneath me began to crumble, the weight of their anguish tearing at the very fabric of reality. I screamed as the darkness erupted, and as I was yanked into the abyss, all that I could hear was a chorus of voices dissolving into oblivion, their last cries fading into a chilling promise, "Find us or join us." And with one final, sickening pull, I was drawn into an empty void, where silence reigned and all hope fled the scene, leaving me to stare into a future that promised only one thing, the relentless pursuit of those who never discovered their salvation. The silence that permeated the empty void was suffocating, a heavy curtain woven with dread and despair. My mind raced, struggling to comprehend the horrific events that had just unfolded. I was adrift through an infinite darkness, a disembodied consciousness grappling with a reality that twisted and conformed to the sinister iterations of my fears. And then an exhalation that felt like 1,000 suffocated whispers filled the emptiness around me. It surged with an energy that pulsed against me, threading through the fabric of my thoughts. "You're still here," it hissed, a sinister melody that echoed through the abyss. Suddenly, a flicker of light ignited at the periphery of my vision, a pale shimmer that slowly expanded, revealing the contours of a vast, dense forest shrouded in fog. The air was thick and heavy, as if saturated with countless sorrows, each breath suffused with the weight of nameless despair. Unfamiliar scents of damp earth and decay melded into a grotesque perfume, tugging at my instincts to flee. Yet, in the distance, a low moan reverberated, hinting at something primal, something tortured, calling out through the silence like a banshee wailing in the night. Driven by curiosity and the encroaching terror that wrapped around my heart, I found myself stepping into the fog. The landscape shifted, trees looming like skeletal hands reaching down, eager to snare me amid their gnarled branches. Eerie glimpses of pale faces flickered among the trunks, eyes wide with terror, mouths stitched into silent screams. "Help us!" the voices echoed, a haunting chorus that drifted through the branches, weaving with the wind like a lament. As I ventured deeper, the underbrush shimmered with shadows darting just beyond the edges of my awareness. I pressed forward, compelled by an unseen force, until I stumbled upon a clearing, bathed in a dim, ghostly glow. At its center lay an ancient well, its stones chipped and covered in creeping ivy, the mouth yawning ominously like the maw of a predator patiently waiting for a feast. Carefully, I approached, peering into the darkness that swallowed it, a void so profound it seemed to pulse like a living heartbeat. My breath caught in my throat as I heard the whispers surge again, now rising from the depths of the well like an unearthly wind spiraling upward. "Find them!" A tighter grip of urgency clawed at my mind. "Before darkness consumes us all." With rising dread, I turned away from the well, but something caught my eye, a flicker of movement beneath the veil of fog. Figures emerged, wrapping themselves in the mist, disfigured souls, each one entreating mercy with broken forms and pleading, vacant stares. Hollow-eyed, they drifted toward me, their hands outstretched, spectral fingers trembling in desperation. "Don't leave us," they implored, their voices piercing through the fog with a chilling sense of urgency. I felt their despair seep into my skin, chilling my very bones, urging me to join their lost lineage, to become part of their pain. Panic clawed at me as I felt my feet sink into the earth, their hold growing heavier, as if the ground itself sought to ensnare me within this realm of shadows. "What do you want from me?" I cried, my voice breaking against the relentless whispers swirling around me. "Find us!" echoed the chorus, now suffused with anger, a surge of power enveloping the clearing. The shadows thickened, coiling tighter around me, wrapping their cold tendrils around my heart. Then, an unbearable roar erupted from the depths of the well, shaking the very ground beneath my feet. A black mist poured forth, cascading over the figures surrounding me. Their faces twisted into grotesque masks of anguish and fury. "You cannot know our sorrow unless you face it." I stumbled backward, gasping for air as the mist coiled around my throat, tightening like a serpent. I knew, in that very instant, that I had stumbled into a tale far darker than my own, a story laden with pain I couldn't hope to unravel, but even as they closed in, consumed by their anguish, a single word blared through the tumult. "Escape." That last plea pierced the madness, giving me a moment's clarity. I turned on my heel and ran, the shadows lunging for me as the clamorous cries crescendoed into a cacophony of madness. My heart choked on fear as the figures behind me swirled into a horrid tempest, threatening to drag me down into their eternal night. And just as the last sliver of hope flickered, I burst from the fog, the trees parting before me like a mouth yawning wide. But as I stumbled into the light, it flickered and dimmed, the forest behind me convulsing into a whirlpool of wails, and I realized it was not the light leading me to safety, but another path drawn from dark tendrils, pulling me back toward ultimate despair. With my heart pounding, I turned, but the figures were not done with me. They advanced with renewed fervor, and I felt fresh tendrils clinging to my limbs, exerting pressure that threatened to crush the very essence of my being. In that moment, as the void loomed closer, I understood the fractured truth. I was bound not only to their hunt but to their legacy, a living conduit of untold terror, destined to either unearth the horror or succumb to it entirely. My scream echoed through the forest as a final vision spiraled into view, a glimpse of a past I was meant to uncover. It was the key to their salvation, or my own eternal demise. And then, in a blink, a figure emerged from the shadows, staring directly at me with unblinking eyes. The realization struck like a thunderclap as I recognized her, a ghostly reflection of my own haunted face. A chilling voice emanated from her lips, the very last thing I heard before the darkness swallowed my world whole. "Do you remember what you sought?" The whispers echoed in the inky blackness, churning within my mind like a maelstrom. I could still see her, the stranger, or was she me? Her ethereal form fading into the void as if she had never existed at all. My heart raced against the suffocating silence that gripped my surroundings like a malignant vine, squeezing the breath from my lungs. "Do you remember what you sought?" The question hung in the air, a cursed riddle that begged for an answer, yet every attempt to grasp at the remnants of truth eluded me, slipping away like sand through clenched fingers. All I had was a gnawing sense of urgency, an instinctive push to flee, lest the shadows consume me entirely, that I stumbled forward through a fog thick with despair, a perverse gravity compelling me deeper into the darkness. The trees closed in around me, their twisted branches clawing at my skin like icy fingers seeking to pull me back into their grasp. Every step felt like traversing a haunted memory, every snap of a twig echoing like the lament of those spectral souls still pursuing me. "Help us!" Their cries floated through the mist once more, twisting with a frantic desperation. The anguish in their voices clawed at the corners of my mind, rekindling memories long buried and forgotten. Fragments emerged, faces, names, moments of intimacy that flared like fireflies before being snuffed out into cold shadows. It was then I realized my own hands were not alone. A shimmering light pulsed against my left palm, as if something was tethered to me, desperately trying to break through the suffocating fog. Tentatively, I opened my hand, revealing a tarnished locket, its surface marred by time yet still gleaming with an otherworldly glow. As I traced my fingers over the intricate etchings that spiraled around its surface, flashes of vivid memories erupted from the darkness: a laughing child at play, warm sun soaking into golden strands of hair, a chorus of tranquil laughter filling the air. But then, like a stone thrown into a placid pond, those serene images shattered into jagged shards of horror. "Look out!" A voice rang in my ears as a shadow lunged toward the child from my memories, a figure cloaked in darkness, its horrible visage an amalgamation of every terror I had faced. The scene combusted, replaced with the young girl's terrified screams, her laughter morphing into cries for help that echoed relentlessly, permeating the very fabric of the air around me. The locket sprang open, revealing a portrait of her, the same child from my fragmented dreams, but her eyes now stared vacant and hollow, tears frozen forever on her cheeks. My heart sank, a dread heavier than stone settling in my gut. Who was she to me? "Remember us," the shadows whispered, their voices weaving through the fog with malicious glee. "Our pain is your pain." The ground trembled beneath my feet, a tremor of anticipation vibrating through the forest, and I felt the locket's warmth intensify, thrumming in rhythm with my heart, guiding me towards something I feared to discover. I pressed forward, knowing that beyond this veil of agony lay answers I no longer understood but couldn't deny. Strange shapes began to swirl into view as the fog thinned reluctantly, a dilapidated cabin standing as a mausoleum in the mist, worn and splintered with age. My chest tightened at the sight. It was a memory I recognized, albeit a haunting one buried behind a barricade of fear. The cabin loomed before me, and a whispering wind beckoned me closer, soft yet insistent, curling through the cracked wooden door. Inside, "You must go, the truth awaits," but reality quaked when I noticed the figures forming outside, shadows dancing in the mist. Unable to discern if they were alive or mere phantoms, they drifted closer, faces contorted into grotesque masks of fury and despair. I could almost hear their hearts beating in tandem with that horrific roar bubbling from the ancient well, a sinister cadence that signaled the approach of something more profound, something I had not yet encountered. Fueled by desperation, I reached for the locket, memories swirling anew as I stood before the cabin. The door creaked upon my trembling touch, revealing a pitch-black interior, filled with an insidious silence that threatened to swallow me whole. But no sooner had I stepped over the threshold than darkness surged from the corners, a palpable force inundating my senses, heavy with forgotten grief and suffering. I turned, but the figures had vanished from my sight, replaced instead by an oppressive stillness that echoed the unanswered question reverberating through my head: who was I meant to find? And as I stood there, engulfed by shadows, the cabin trembled, and a voice hissed menacingly from behind me: "You think you can escape what you've awakened?" My breath caught as I turned slowly, dread pooling in my stomach. An icy grip wrapped around my heart, and I found myself face to face with a figure in the doorway. Its hollowed eyes bore into me, and with renewed horror, I recognized the faint outline as that of the girl from my memories. "Do you remember?" Her voice was muffled yet filled with a haunting resonance. She held a bloodied hand toward me, and a smile crept onto her ghostly face, twisting into something unholy as darkness seeped all around us. In that moment, time stretched infinitely, filled with terror, anticipation, and an undeniable truth: I was not in control of any of this. And just before the void consumed me completely, her ghostly hand shot forward, pulsing with an overwhelming darkness. The threshold of the cabin snapped shut behind me, sealing my fate. Then, with a spine-chilling laugh, she whispered the last words I would hear before losing myself to the unimaginable. This is only the beginning. My heart hammered against my ribcage, thrumming its own desperate plea for survival as the cabin pulsated with malignant energy. The air thickened, rippling with the weight of a million oppressive memories. With every breath, I tasted the dust of antiquity, the chill of despair whispering through the forlorn wood. I had entered a realm not just of physical decay, but of fractured souls clinging to the remnants of their existence. The girl lingered at the threshold, her bloodied hand now dangling by her side, ghostly fingers trailing invisible threads of sorrow that beckoned me deeper into her torment. The darkness writhed at her back, eager to embrace me, ready to overflow with secrets long buried. "You're not alone here," she muttered, a tremor of encouragement laced with dread, as she stepped forward to grasp my hand that I recoiled instinctively, heart racing as her touch chilled my very core. Letting go of the locket did not seem like an option, as though its warmth was the only barrier that separated me from the yawning abyss at my feet. Somehow, I mustered the courage to ask, "What do you want from me?" Her lips twisted into an eerie smile, one that hinted at both pain and a terrible understanding of what lay ahead. "You've awakened us. We're bound now." The last word dropped like a stone, echoing against the silent walls, ricocheting through my mind as fleeting images of shadows flickering behind her flashed before my eyes. Before I had time to comprehend, a cacophony of whispers erupted inside the cabin, intertwining like tortured souls trapped in a twisted dance. "Help us," they implored. "Release us from the curse," while ghostly hands clawed at the air as if trying to reach me. That a haunting realization crept into my being. All those desperate cries were not merely echoes but a manifestation of pain, lives abruptly extinguished yet yearning for liberation. I staggered backward, pulling away from the girl, but she surged forward, the darkness rippling around her like a restless tide. "You cannot escape us. We are forever tethered," she hissed, as the cabin walls resounded with an otherworldly groan. The wretched spirits embraced her, merging into a grotesque shadow, undulating with every tortured breath, every heartbeat throbbing against the silence. I felt my mind beginning to unravel as fragments of their stories infiltrated my thoughts, a series of events that led to seething, festering wounds as wide as the gaping maw of the cabin. Suddenly, my foot caught on something lying in the darkness, sending me tumbling to the floor. Gasping, I clutched at my legs, trying to steady myself as the shadows danced in cold, mocking laughter. I looked down to see an ancient doll, its porcelain face smeared with dirt and something darker. I could swear it blinked as I hesitated, its button eyes echoing the despair that pulsated in the air. "What are you?" I found myself whispering, every rational thought overshadowed by a primal fear. The girl stepped closer, her face now painted in an unsettling light, the contours transforming, stretching into a visage so small yet powerful. "That is the embodiment of their grief," she said softly, "and it is yours now." As her words settled in, the tension within the room shifted. The whispers grew louder, mingling with the hollow sounds of moans as if a million tragedies rose from the earth to reclaim what was lost. Figures molded from silhouettes emerged from dark corners, their forms hunched in anguish, faces twisted in agony as they dragged themselves across the dust-coated floor, their eyes locked onto me. "Remember us," the mournful chorus erupted anew, and for a brief, terrible moment, I felt their pain weaving itself into my own, pulling at the edges of sanity. I had seen countless souls, but never had I felt their shared agony so distinctly, like clutches of cold fingers grasping around my throat. Then, just as suddenly as the wave had hit, the voices receded, entwined in an unseen current. The girl's eyes bore into mine, wide with an indiscernible sadness. "You need to find the truth about us," she whispered. Her tone gentle yet laced with urgency as her gaze flickered toward the cabin walls. Beyond them, I saw silhouettes moving, restless and tormented, pleading to be heard, desperate to be remembered. That I scrambled up, struggling to comprehend the depths of what had surrounded me. "I can't stay here. I don't belong to your suffering," I shouted, echoing the instinctive wish to escape this nightmare, but all my words held was futility, fading against the suffocating whispers. The cabin responded, tremors coursing through the structure, as aching moans issued from the walls. "You can't escape the truth," nor can you run from the past, a multitude of voices warned, and I felt the cabin's hunger rise within me, a gluttonous force seeking to clutch my heart as tightly as it clung to its own pantheon of sorrow. Panic surged in my veins, and I tore myself from the girl's anguished gaze, racing toward the window, where shadows pulsed like dark liquid, swirling in a malevolent tide. I could escape, make my body a vessel to flee this loathsome prison, but just then, the glass shattered with a deafening crack, splinters erupting as darkness spilled forth, shedding tendrils that wrapped around my legs like chains. "What have you done?" the girl cried out, and her voice resonated with palpable anguish as she and the spirits pulled away, their collective presence dissipating into the shadows I had unwittingly unleashed, and as the darkness converged upon me, pulling me down into its embrace, I realized that I had not escaped the horrors surrounding me, I had merely become one with them. With a final shuddering breath, I looked at her, pleading through the choking darkness, "Help me." But as her ethereal form faded into the chaos, I heard her last words ringing clear, "You opened the door, and now it will never close." The darkness consumed me, tendrils wrapping around my body as I felt myself sinking into an infinite abyss. Twisted screams echoed around me, a cacophony of despair that invaded my very essence. Each cry seemed to claw at my sanity, dragging me into their collective torment. I grasped the remnants of my consciousness, knowing that if I surrendered, I would be lost forever. Suddenly, the darkness retreated, and I found myself back in the cabin, the air stifling with a tension so thick it clawed at my throat. I staggered to my feet, my heart pounding in a frenzied rhythm, every breath a laborious task. As the shadows coiled back to their corners, a morbid curiosity flickered within me, yearning to understand the darkness that had nearly swallowed me whole. The girl stood in the center of the room, trembling, her features now more defined against the wavering shadows that encircled her. "You've seen what waits for you," she whispered, her voice strangely serene in the chaos. "It yearns to claim you, to incorporate your suffering into its eternal narrative." "Why me?" I asked, desperation hiding beneath layers of dauntless anger. "What do you want?" The dusty wood groaned beneath our feet as her expression shifted. It was as though the shadows behind her were chipping away at her very being. "You have a unique energy," she said, her voice echoing as if more than one entity spoke through her. "You are a beacon for those lost, a vessel through which their pain can be memorialized. If you don't embrace it, they will drown you in their sorrow, feeding from your fear." A freezing dread unfurled in my stomach, coiling tighter with each word. I glanced towards the corners where amorphous shapes stirred uneasily, their forms blurring at the edge of my vision but undeniably present, vibrating with an energy that felt alive. They watched, waited. The tension in the air thickened, a palpable dread that seemed to choke the very breath from my lungs. "Tell me how to break this," I demanded, clenching my fists, a flicker of rage igniting my resolve. "I want to become part of their nightmare." The girl's smile wavered, a heartbreaking mix of sympathy and dread. "You cannot simply break it, you must understand it. The answer lies buried within the lost tales, within the fragments of their lives that remain here, hidden. Only by uncovering their truth can you find your escape." Just as I resolved to confront this daunting task, a shadow darted forward from the recesses of the cabin, coiling itself around my ankle, icy fingers grasping desperately. My breath hitched in sudden terror. It was the doll. Its beady eyes reflected a disembodied sorrow, and I felt an insatiable urge to draw it closer to discover what dark secrets it held. "No!" the girl exclaimed, lunging toward me, desperation etched on her face. "You must not touch it." But it was too late. The doll surged forward, and as my fingers brushed against its cool surface, a series of images detonated in my mind, a torrent of memories that did not belong to me, yet felt unnervingly familiar. A little girl with long, flowing hair playing beside a river under an ominous sky, an anguished scream that shattered the silence, followed by the suffocating hush of a forest cloaked in shadow. I was lost within their world, trapped in the wailing echoes of a history steeped in tragedy. "No!" I yelled, wrenching my hand back, but it was too late. The visions clawed deeper, exposing horror after horror, weaving through my thoughts until their whispers became deafening. The cabin swayed, quaking as if it were alive, desperate to contain the truth I had unwittingly excavated. the walls began to bleed a thick, dark fluid, crawling down like the remnants of lost souls escaping their prison. Shadows flared, momentarily morphing into writhing silhouettes of those who had come before me, their features contorted in pain, mouths agape in silent cries that reverberated through the air. "Stop it!" I shouted, but the shadows surged forth, merging into a swirling maelstrom that formed before me, a terrible, haunted visage that poured forth agony and sorrow. My resolve faltered as tendrils of guilt snaked around my heart, twisting my deepest fears and regrets into a tapestry of anguish. And amid that chaos, the girl's voice attempted to break through the dissonance. "You have to face them. Help them find peace. This is your only chance." Just as the weight of their anguish threatened to make me collapse, I felt the doll's energy pulse in my hand, transforming into a beacon of light piercing through the darkness. The swirling chaos around me halted, suspended in the air, as if waiting for my choice. What lay on the other side of that decision hung heavily in the balance, a decision that meant embracing the suffocating sorrow or igniting the fragile threads of hope. The girl watched, eyes locked onto mine, the weight of her unspoken warning settled heavy in the air. Suddenly, the walls trembled with a familiar groan, and the shadows moaned a chorus of despair. The trembling grew more erratic, shifting into a cacophony of restrained rage, a warning that my inaction might summon the very horrors I feared. With a deep breath that filled my lungs with dread, I took a step toward the swirling darkness, and then it struck. A funereal howl shattered the silence as the shadows roared, surging forth in a ravenous tide that clawed at my sanity. In that moment, the cabin quaked violently as reality twisted around me. I felt myself being pulled into the abyss, the threshold between my fate and their unfinished stories disintegrating. As I was ripped into the swirling darkness, a solitary scream pierced my consciousness: "You will never escape us." The void encased me, plunged into despair that was the last thing I remembered before total darkness ensnared my thoughts, echoing with the remnants of my shattered resolve. Time lost all meaning, fragmented pieces of reality blending into a nightmarish kaleidoscope. I floated in the void, disembodied, as phantoms of sorrow circled around, whispering secrets of their past lives, stories woven in blood and pain. Their voices were a symphony of despair, drowning me in heartache. It felt as if they were reaching through the abyss, clawing at my very soul, desperate to share their final moments, their tribulations frozen in time. Suddenly, the darkness around me twisted, forming a hallway lined with flickering lights. Each light flickered like a heartbeat, pulsing with a life of its own. As I drifted down this narrow corridor, an icy wind swept past me, carrying a scent, something familiar, comforting yet horrifying, the smell of earth and decay. At the end of the hallway, a door creaked softly, beckoning me with a promise of answers. I hesitated, a chill racing down my spine, but the whispers grew louder, pleading for me to step inside. With trembling hands, I pushed the door open and felt a wave of dread wash over me as I crossed the threshold into a narrow room, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. Old photographs cluttered the walls, positioning themselves like portraits of the damned, a gallery of grinning faces now morphed into grotesque snarls. I recognized the girl from the cabin among them. She stood with those haunting eyes, her face trapped in a silent scream, as if desperately trying to warn others of the fate that awaited them. The room felt alive, pulsating with a dark energy that throbbed in sync with my heart. The air turned thick and suffocating, swirling around my throat like a noose. As I took a cautious step forward, the photographs seemed to leer at me, eyes following my every movement, the echoes of their laughter transforming into cries of anguish, their stories imprinted upon the very fabric of the room that I felt an insatiable urge to understand them, yearning to peel back the layers of their torment. In the corner of the room, an ancient tome lay open on a wooden lectern, the pages yellowed with age. I approached it, hope battling against the choking dread clawing at my insides, but as I leaned in to read, the words morphed under my gaze, swirling into an indecipherable haze, festive symbols of pain skipping across the paper like specters tormenting me. Suddenly, an acrid stench filled the air. I recoiled, my senses heightened, as shadows pooled in the corners of the room and congealed into dark forms, figures emerging from the depths of my mind, manifesting as grotesque versions of the faces in the photographs. They lumbered towards me, mouths stretched wide in horrifying grins, as fragments of their stories crashed into my consciousness like waves upon a shore of despair. The first one reached out, fingers like brittle twigs, clutching my arm with a grip that burned through fabric and flesh, and as it drew closer, it whispered, "We seek vengeance." Cold dread enveloped me, realizing they weren't just lost souls, there was something more. They wanted retribution, and I was their key to freedom. "No. I can't help you," I gasped, ripping my arm free. But they closed in, and I felt a wave of panic bubble within me, the corners of my vision fading into black as if I were slipping further into their collective nightmare. "Your choice has been made," a voice growled from the darkness behind me. I turned, dread pooling in my stomach as I saw her, the girl from the cabin, transformed, her eyes swirling with midnight fury. "You awakened them, and now you must bear the weight of their sins. Please," I begged, struggling to keep my feet planted on the ground, but the shadows tugged me toward the specters, their anguished cries echoing in my ears, drowning out reality. "I want to be part of this." A cacophony erupted as the room convulsed, the shadows merging into a pulsating storm, dark, hungry tendrils reaching for me, the faces of the lost contorting in anguish. I felt myself slipping, their sorrow rampaging through my veins, igniting my deepest fears. As the shadows converged, a sudden blinding light erupted from the tomb. It burst forth, illuminating the dark room, illuminating their tormented faces as they screamed in unison, echoing against the walls, and then, with bone-shaking clarity, I understood, the only way to escape was to join them, to accept their pain, to bear their burdens. A guttural scream escaped my throat, reverberating through the chamber as I wrestled with the agonizing choice thrust upon me. I was at the precipice of their nightmare, realizing that to fight was to invite their wrath. As the light flickered, dimming against the encroaching shadows, the last thing I heard before darkness swallowed me whole was the girl's chilling voice whispering a taunt, "You're one of us now." The darkness closed in. It felt as though I was waking from a nightmare, though the oppressive weight of fear clung to my skin like a second layer. I opened my eyes slowly, the world around me coalescing after my long plunge into the abyss. I was back in the cabin, but it had transformed, the walls no longer felt like a prison of shadows. Instead, they wore a cloak of grotesque elegance, adorned with the very photographs that had haunted me before. The faces looked more alive now, twisted, yet joyous, as though they had risen from the grave to witness their reckoning. My heart raced as I took in the room, and then I saw her, the girl. She stood at the far corner, her features bathed in an otherworldly glow, and yet, there was something profoundly wrong. I realized with a start that she was older now, the childlike innocence replaced by a knowing gaze that sent chills cascading down my spine. "Welcome back," she greeted, her voice honeyed yet laced with bitterness. "You've finally come to understand." "Understand what?" I rasped, the memories of what had happened flooding back, my struggle against the whispers, the ghastly manifestations, the everything that had tied me to their dark fate. "What do you want from me?" The shadows slithered closer, curling around her like a miasmic lover. "You were chosen." Her eyes sparkled, a harrowing delight glinting like shards of glass. "They need a vessel to manifest someone worth hearing, someone with a voice." "A vessel?" My throat felt constricted, an icy grip around my heart. "No, I want to become another one of you." She stepped forward, the smile on her face unnervingly wide, distorting her features. "But you already have, haven't you? You've opened the door, felt the call of sorrow echo in your veins. The moment you touched that doll the room shuddered, and the photographs around me began to pulse, the faces bending and contorting in rapture. I could hear their voices now, a haunting melody filled with urgency and despair, entwining with my thoughts. "Help us. Set us free," they cried. "We are bound to you now." The realization hit me like a freight train, the pain they carried was now mine. I was entwined in their narratives, their suffering threaded through the very fabric of my existence. "What have you done to me?" I screeched, stepping back, but the blurry forms of those lost souls pooled around my feet, their grasp tight and clamoring, pulling me into their fold. You're here to help them, the girl said, tilting her head, her voice taking on an ethereal quality. All the lives that were lost, their stories must be told. Or they will tear this world apart in search of release. Release? I echoed, bile rising in my throat. I was trapped, hunted by the very essence of despair. I can't. I'm not equipped to carry this burden. The girl's eyes darkened, shadows flickering in their depths. You've already accepted their truth, through fear and connection. Now, their legacy is yours to bear. Just then, the photographs erupted with a symphony of screams, and the ground shook violently beneath me. Shapes emerged from the walls, monstrous shades of despair, their mouths woven into smiles of malice. Join us. They howled, pulling at my limbs and binding me in an unbreakable hold. Just as I was about to lose all hope, a memory crashed over me, a moment from my past. I saw her again, the girl from my daydreams, a laugh, a voice like a music box, a promise of a better day, before loss suffocated the joy from my life. I gripped the locket tightly in my hand. It had warmth, a flicker of light in the encompassing darkness. With a surge of clarity, I realized that in order to break free, I needed to dig deep into the goodness that was left within me, to manifest it in such a way that the darkness would be repelled. I will remember, I whispered. I will tell their stories. Immediately, the onslaught of shadowy figures hesitated, their malevolent expressions fading, minds caught between fury and frail hope. I took a deep breath, channeling every fragment of light and love that I had left, holding on to the memories of innocence and laughter, the moment. My voice broke free, they trembled, but I pressed on. I will give them names, every lost spirit will have a story to pierce through the darkness. I will carry their hope. As the words flowed, vibrant light began to emit from my locket, cascading through the room. Every face in the photographs flickered to life, bearing witness to their tales of sorrow and triumph, enveloped in radiant light. The cacophony of anguish morphed into an uplifting harmony. Who are you? I cried, throwing open my arms to embrace their myriad stories. I will not let your pain disappear. The cabin trembled again, but this time under a cleansing wave of light instead of sorrow's grip. The malevolent shadows writhed and howled, pulled apart by the surge of renewed hope. As they recoiled, some began to disintegrate, their forms enveloped in the radiance of compassionate remembrance, fading into the ether. You've awoken them. The girl howled, anger churning in her voice as her eyes blazed with a furious fire. You cannot contain them. Maybe not, I admitted, but I can guide them. With a fierce resolve, I continued to recount their tales, each word a ray of piercing light, dispelling the shadows encroaching upon me. And then, everything shifted, the atmosphere transformed, shadows scattered before a brilliant light. Flickering spirits began to rise, moving toward the heavens like gossamer dreams set free. The cabin echoed with their whispers, the burden of anguish lifting as their stories swirled around me, wrapping me in compassion and understanding. But then came a searing pain in my chest, and I turned to the girl, the shadows converging with renewed vigor around her. Her expression morphed into one of furious desperation. You think it ends here? You do not get to leave. You have bound our fate. No. You are wrong. I shouted against the tide of darkness. But the shadows surged, slashing at my resolve, and as I felt myself starting to slip, the locket in my hand exploded with brilliance, bathing me in radiant warmth. Every ounce of their sorrow combined with compassion flooded into my heart, turning chaos into clarity. Then, I faced them both, the girl and the swirling shades of despair. You will not take me. I proclaimed, grounded by the memories I now wore like armor, fiery and fierce. I am my own keeper. I choose to carry not just your darkness, but also your light. In that moment, reality twisted, and the girl's expression morphed into something almost pleading. You do not know what you are unleashing. The shadows howled, threatening to devour us all, but I did not waver. As I spoke, a brilliant light erupted, enveloping the cabin, shredding its haunting form apart. I closed my eyes, inviting the warmth to swallow me, to take me with it. For a fleeting moment, I felt them, the lost souls, intertwined with love and sorrow, rising beside me, their lament changing, morphing into a triumphant anthem. But as the darkness clawed at me one last time, I struggled against it, raising my voice above the chaos. I will reclaim your light. I will carry your stories forever. And then, silence engulfed the cabin. I opened my eyes, drenched in radiance. The girl stood before me, the weight of shadows dissipated but not forgotten. Her eyes met mine with profound gratitude, a sliver of warmth igniting behind the darkness. Some doors can never truly close, she whispered, her voice softer now, echoing through the liberated space. But you now hold the key. I stumbled backward, reeling from the revelation, knowing our fates were now intertwined, forever bound through anguish and compassion. That I took a breath, stepping back outside into the sun, the echoes of their lives forever resonating within my heart, a reminder of all that now existed in the light. But deep inside, on the precipice of my very being, a whisper slithered back, dark and haunting, curling around my thoughts as I walked away. Find us, or we will find you. And no matter how much light I carried, the shadows were always close, watching, waiting.